doing this. And here's one of the things I did.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Welcome. Bill Kessler lived every day to the fullest. He lived well deep into his 90s. Tammy told me that just a few days ago she stocked the fridge for Bill, who was busily eating many of his favorite foods just the day before he passed. Bill hiked Machu Picchu, and Giza, and more into his 80s and 90s. He never let his hearing issues or his age stand in the way of anything he wanted to do. Bill's an inspirational guy. His sweetness, his generosity, his kindness, his deep and abiding love and appreciation for Tammy. These are all things that we can learn from Bill. You know, one of my favorite memories of Bill involve our monthly Beth Tikva Rebbe's Tish. A few years ago, I had this wacko idea that we would reconstruct the traditional Orthodox Shabbos Tish on Friday nights at the synagogue, and we would stay late after services, singing, banging on the tables, noshing, storytelling, and even having a little secret l'chaim. Bill engaged with this the way Bill would, in that for some reason this struck a chord with him, and he felt drawn to these tishes. So he made it a point to come to all of them. He then offered to financially support them. And because of his hearing issues, he always sat just to my left in the next seat, right next to me. I'm seeing people who have seen this, who have been there from the congregation. He sat right next to me, and Bill, bless him, would do his very best to sing along. Always just a beat behind. But Bill had more ruach, more spirit than anybody along that whole table, bringing so much joy to our communal tish. I want to take a moment and speak about Bill and Tammy's love for one another. Yesterday, as Tammy does through a chuckle and a coy smile, she said that she and Bill were together for 50 years, and they were married for 48, of which a total of 47 of those were happy, and that she would take him. I knew she was joking, as I've seen the love and the admiration that Tammy and Bill shared. She told me that she spent 12 hours a day with him at the hospital and at the rehab recently with a whiteboard in hand to help him communicate and to communicate with him. She showed me a video of Bill's 95th birthday, and I know some of you were there, where she brought out mummers to Holiday Village East to play music for Bill and his friends, and Bill's smile was typical Bill. It was wide and it was full. Tammy, we hold you now, especially as you mourn and grieve. Your synagogue family and your biological family cares so deeply for you. And it's my prayer that you feel the love and support in this room, at your congregation, and with all of those watching today. They're literally surrounding you. Our Jewish tradition teaches that while the physical body is temporary, the soul is eternal. And together, today, we gather for sacred purpose, to pray for the full and complete rest for Bill's body, and as he's laid to rest in a bit at Crescent, we note that his soul is bound to the bond of life to each of you, and we seek blessings for the continued elevation of his soul. May our time together today have purpose and deep meaning, and may it honor well Bill's memory, who passed away on Monday. I'm Rabbi Nathan Weiner. I'm the rabbi at Congregation Beth Tikva in Marlton, where Bill and Tammy have made their spiritual home for the last 30 plus years. I'm joined today by our Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Gary Gans, whom you'll hear from shortly. It's an honor on behalf of our families and our entire congregation to be present with your family today. Bill is, of course, as I mentioned, survived by his wife Tammy and their son John and John's wife Elsie. His grandchildren, Brooke and Nicholas. Bill's sister Beatrice and his nieces Louise and Renee. And his sister-in-law and brother-in-law, Vera and Bill. May all of your love for one another carry you through this difficult transition. Going to now recite Psalm 23, a psalm universal across the Abrahamic faith traditions, begins, Mizmor David Adonai ro'i lo achzar, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters, he restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. I'm honored to welcome to the Bima Congregation Beth Tikva's Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Gary Gans.
Ma'ayan HaChayim, wellspring of life. We've come together today, sharing our sorrow, and to commemorate Bill's life. We thank God for all that was good and true in his life, and for the precious memories which shall endure. Eternal God, his family, his friends, fellow congregants are bowed in grief as we seek light to dispel the dark gloom that threatens to overwhelm them. God, be gracious to those who mourn, for they are in distress. Bless them with your compassion, ease their burden of sorrow. Send them light and peace. For it is written, fear not, as I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I'll sustain you with my power. And let us all say, Amen. I've chosen to share a prayer that I've read many times from this very pulpit for members of our congregation, indeed even members of my own family. It speaks about life and love, loss, compassion and closure. Written thousands of years ago by a rabbi and scholar named Ben Sirach, I read for you in translation his sense of understanding of life itself. Wrote, we are all destined to die. We share with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. Cry for the dead. Hide not your grief. Do not restrain your mourning. But remember that continuing sorrow is worse than death. When the dead are at rest, let their memory be a source of peace, and be consoled when the soul departs. Death is better than a life of pain, and eternal rest than lingering illness. As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore, are our few days in eternity. The good things in life last for a short time, but a good name, a good reputation, endures forever. And Bill does have, will have a good name, a good reputation. He was a quiet guy, but he had such an inner strength and a knowledge of who he was and who he wanted to be that it was contagious. During various illnesses or struggles, I'd give him a chance to complain. He wouldn't take the bait. He always gracefully accepted his fate. Whether it was talking about his hearing or his other medical concerns, he put out his hand and looked at the sky and let it be known it's not in our hands, but he's accepted the will, perhaps of God. This week's Torah portion is Pekudei. So not only does it end a portion of the Torah, one of the 5 books of Moses, which itself is era setting, just as his death is the end of an era. In this Torah portion, we have instructions given to the Israelites in the desert to how to build the Mishkan, how to build the tabernacle. There were directions that came from God. These weren't just Moses' ideas, but they were God-driven. And all the many years that I've known Bill and Tammy, this mitzvah, the infrastructure of the synagogue construction, was part of Bill's own delights. And he accepted this as if it was God's own mitzvah to be part of the building. Again, quietly, Bill gave donations to the synagogue. for things you can't see. Maybe you can feel the air coming through. And only a few of us really knew that he was the source of this. And the several different times he worked for, paid for, and tried to upgrade the sound system at the synagogue. And many times he was the secret mystery man behind the scenes. And over the years, as his hearing deteriorated, I remember his struggle with hearing, understanding, and knowing he was part of what was happening, both at services and my discussion groups, and he sat at my left too, just as Rabbi Nathan describes. So he secured a portable microphone system, a box that sat on the pulpit, and he gave me a microphone to please use. It kind of worked for a little while, and then we had an upgrade. He went and he bought himself a very, very, I'm sure, expensive hearing aid, and he gave me a personal clip microphone that was beamed directly to him, and only to him. I remember once I needed a glass of water, and I asked through the microphone, but he didn't understand, or he couldn't believe I was talking to him about it. But he was so thrilled, and even when that didn't really work, Bill's demeanor was still such that he wanted to know what was happening. Sometimes he'd come up after the service and ask me about a point that he kind of heard and wanted to respond to it. And during the discussion groups, when I brought the box out, which may have blasted some of the other participants, was just right for him. He always responded coherently, cogently, and on the topic, having well thought out what he wanted to say. He didn't speak a lot, but when he did, it was right on point and was really supportive and helpful. He was too polite to tell me when the system wasn't working. We had a secret handshake or eyesight when I forgot to turn it on, so at least I did my best to help him out. But he was part and parcel of our community and of our congregation. And by the way, he was so proud of Tammy, her accomplishments, her travels, and was so glad that even though he couldn't, she did. And this is part of his vicarious experience. So he had a great attitude, constantly. Now, maybe at home, he didn't sometimes, but at the synagogue, he was Mr. Cheerful. And that was such a relief to have him there and be present with us. I welcome two speakers who are going to come up and share as well about their memories of Bill, and I call first on Vera. Yeah.
I'm Tammy's sister, and I hope I can get through this. I've known Bill for over 50 years. I fell in love with him immediately. I loved Bill like more of a family, like my brother, and I always told him that. Bill was the most kind-hearted person, lovable person ever. My husband, who couldn't be here due to illness, he said, tell everybody what a gentleman Bill was. And he certainly was. My kids loved him. He loved my kids. When they were all little, they would go to Aunt Tammy and Uncle Bill's house for 2 weeks. They couldn't wait. I mean, they could not wait to get together with Aunt Tammy and Uncle Bill. And for that, I thank them. They left such good memories for the kids and for me. And all I can say is I loved him dearly. I will miss him dearly. And that heaven has gained an angel. And he's an angel in all our hearts. will always be an angel in my heart. And I love him dearly. And I will miss him so much. And to my sister, I'm so sorry for you. I really am. And to Nick and everybody. I'm so sorry. But at least you know you have good memories of your dad and your husband. And nobody ever has a bad word to say to Bill. Nobody can. He loved everybody. He'd give you good advice, whether you liked it or took it or not. But he was there. He cared for you. And all I can say is thank you for everybody for loving my brother-in-law the way you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. From the book of Ecclesiastes, for everything there is a season, time for every experience under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. And continuing to speak about Bill, I now call on Nick.
Good afternoon. My grandpa was an exceptional man who always put others before himself. He was a great father, great husband, great grandfather to me and Brooke. He demanded perfection in everything I was doing, from sports to school and to life, and offer all the help he could give. Whenever he got the chance, he'd sit me down and have one of his famous talks. And believe me, he could talk up a storm. To the point where my grandma had to tell him to stop. I remember this one time we were shopping for school clothes. The year prior, I was a medium in pants and a medium in shirt, so he assumed I was the same size. I went on to try and share in pants. When I came outside, I said, "Nope, that shirt's a little snug. You don't fit in those pants anymore, buddy." I told him, "What do you mean?" He says, "You have a gut, start going to the treadmill." At that moment, I knew Grandpa was more than a grandpa. He was a best friend. He saw me walk across the stage in the stands, but with him gone, he'll see Brooke from above. I know he's proud of her and the amazing girl she's become. Grandpa was very big on school. All the time he would ask me, "How's school, Nick? When do you graduate again?" A couple months ago when I saw him for the last time, he knew I was about to get my associate's degree. He asked me if I had applied to Montclair yet, and I said not yet. His response is, "You better get on it, sport." That's what I did, and now I've been accepted and will be getting my bachelor's degree in 2024. These next 2 years are dedicated to you, Grandpa. I'll always make you proud. Thank you for being a great role model, and thank you for letting me here when I needed one. You are my best friend and will always be beyond the grave. Love you, big guy. Continue to watch all of us as we continue to be the best versions of ourselves for you. To end it, I just want to take a picture of everyone.
It's with these thoughts and memories and intentions in mind that we move to the central prayer of a Jewish memorial service, El Maleh Rachamim, which asks that Bill's soul be granted true rest on the wings of God's divine presence. If you're physically able, I welcome you to please rise. I'll read it first first in English, followed by chanting in the Hebrew. God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the Shekhinah, the divine presence in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as resplendence of the firmament to the soul of William Kessler, who has gone to his eternal home. For charity has been donated in remembrance of his soul. May his place of rest be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the All-Merciful One shelter him with the cover of God's wings forever, and bind his soul in the bond of life. Adonai is his heritage. May he rest in his resting place in peace. And let us say, Amen. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Al Kanvei Hashchina, V'malot Kiroshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Zev Binyamin Ben Eliezer, Shalach Le'olamo, Ba'avor Shenadvu Tzadaka Ba'ad Haskarat Nishmato, V'gan Eden Dehe Menuchato, Lachen Bal HaRachamim Yastirehu B'seter Kenafav Le'olamim, V'yitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach Al Mishkavo B'Shalom, V'nomar Amen. Please be seated. Our time together here at the chapel is drawing to a close. A few announcements and reminders. First, donations in lieu of flowers. The family asked that they please be made to Congregation Beth Tikva. That Shiva Minyanim are happening virtually on Zoom tonight at 6:30, and then again Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat at 6:30, beginning with Havdalah and Mariv. Immediately following our time together here, we'll process to Crescent Memorial Park, where Bill will be interred in the Beth Tikva section.
Will the pallbearers please step to the center aisle? And I'll ask if we can rise once more, please.
יושב בסתר עליון, בצל שדי לעולם. אמר להם מחסים את צורתי אלוהי אבטח בו, כי הוא יצילך מפח יכוש מדבר חוות. עברתו יסך לך פתחת כנפיו תחזה, צינה בסוחר עמיתו. לא תירא מפחד לילה מחצי וף יומם. מדבר באופו יהלוך מקטב ישות צהריים. מפה מצילך 1,400 מנחה אליך לא ייגש. רק בעיניך תביט ושלמטו שאם תראה. כי אתה אינם מחזיק עליון שמת מעונך. לא תיונה אליך רע, נגד